Have you ever tried to hold a single stone in your outstretched hand? At first, it feels like nothing. A curiosity. You notice its texture, its coolness, its weight. But if you were asked to hold it for a minute, your muscles would begin to ache. An hour? Your arm would scream in protest. A day? The pain would be unbearable. Your hand numb, paralyzed. The weight of the stone never changes, of course, but the longer you hold it, the heavier it becomes. Unforgiveness is that stone. We pick it up after a moment of pain, a betrayal, a deep wound. We examine it, turn it over and over in our minds, memorizing every sharp edge. We think we are just looking, just remembering. But slowly, without realizing it, our fingers curl around it. Our hand clenches, and we begin to carry it. We carry it everywhere. To work, to bed, to dinner with friends. It sits with us in quiet moments and screams at us in our dreams. It doesn't get heavier, but our soul grows weaker from the strain of carrying it. What if, just for a moment, we considered the possibility of opening our hand? What if we decided to just let it drop? Part 1. The weight of unforgiveness. Imagine a beautiful, intricate garden. This gardens your inner world, your mind, your heart, your spirit. When you are at peace, the garden thrives. Flowers of joy bloom in vibrant colors. Trees of strength stand tall and firm, and a clear stream of consciousness flows gently through the landscape. It is a place of sanctuary, a place of growth. Now, imagine what happens when the seed of a grudge is planted. It doesn't look like much at first. It's a small, dark thing, buried beneath the surface. It is the memory of a harsh word, the sting of a broken promise, the shadow of a betrayal. We might even forget it's there for a while. But this is no ordinary seed. It is a parasitic vine. It doesn't need much light or water. It feeds on the darkness. It draws its nourishment from your resentment, your anger, your replayed conversations, your imagined arguments, your quiet bitterness. Slowly, it begins to sprout. Its tendrils snake through the soft soil of your mind, wrapping themselves around the roots of your joy. The flowers begin to wilt. The vibrant colors of your garden start to fade, replaced by a dull, monochrome gray. The vine grows stronger, thicker, thornier. It chokes the life from the plants around it. The stream of your consciousness becomes murky, blocked by the debris of old hurts. The trees of strength, once unshakable, find their foundations compromised, their bark scarred by the relentless climb of this invasive weed. This is the weight of unforgiveness. It is not a singular event. It is a living, breathing ecosystem of negativity that you host inside yourself. It is a form of self-sabotage disguised as self-protection. You believe you are holding on to the anger to punish the person who hurt you, to keep the memory of the injustice alive. You think of it as a shield, but the shield is impossibly heavy, and it is welded to your own arm. The person who hurt you has likely moved on. They may be living their life, oblivious to the turmoil inside you. They are free. You, the keeper of the grudge, are the one in prison. The bitterness becomes a filter through which you see the world. A friend's innocent comment is twisted into a slight. A partner's mistake is seen as a deliberate act of malice. You start to expect the worst from people because the vine whispers to you, Remember what happened last time. Don't be a fool again. It makes you suspicious, defensive, and isolated. The very connection you crave as a human being is severed by the thorns you've allowed to grow around your heart. And the physical toll is just as real. Think of your body as a finely tuned instrument. When your mind is in a constant state of fight or flight, triggered by the memory of past wounds, your body is flooded with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This isn't a state meant to be sustained for days, weeks, or years. It's for immediate, short-term danger. But for the person who carries unforgiveness, the danger is ever present because it lives in their memory. The heart, the very center of our being, often bears the heaviest burden. Studies in psychoneuroimmunology, the study of the interaction between psychological processes and the nervous and immune systems, have shown a direct link between chronic anger and cardiovascular problems. Holding a grudge can lead to higher blood pressure, increased heart rate, and a greater risk of heart disease. It's as if the metaphorical heavy heart becomes a literal physiological reality. The emotional strain forces the heart to work harder, pumping not just blood, but a cocktail of stress and bitterness through your veins. The immune system also weakens under this constant siege. It becomes less effective at fighting off invaders, making you more susceptible to infections, colds, and other illnesses. The energy that your body should be using for healing, for regeneration, for thriving, is instead diverted to maintaining this state of high alert, this internal war against a ghost from the past. You may experience chronic fatigue, digestive issues, headaches, and muscle tension. Your sleep is disrupted as the mind refuses to shut down, endlessly replaying the scenes of your injury. You are exhausted, not from a day of hard work, but from the invisible, back-breaking labor of hating someone. Consider the mental exhaustion. The sheer amount of brain power it takes to maintain a grudge is staggering. It is a full-time job with the worst possible salary. Your own peace. You become a detective, constantly searching for new evidence to support your old pain. You are a lawyer, endlessly prosecuting a case in the court of your mind, a case that never reaches a verdict. You are the judge, handing down a life sentence, and the jailer, ensuring the sentence is carried out. And most tragically, you are also the prisoner. This mental loop creates deep, well-worn neural pathways in your brain. The more you walk the path of resentment, the easier it is to get there. It becomes a default setting. Your brain becomes efficient at being angry, at feeling victimized. This can lead to anxiety, as you are always on edge, and depression, as the world loses its color, and joy feels like a distant memory from another lifetime. The weight crushes your ability to be present. You cannot fully enjoy a beautiful sunset, a delicious meal, or a warm conversation, because a part of your mind is always absent, chained to the past. The stone is in your hand, and you cannot clap with joy. The vine is in your garden, and you cannot smell the flowers. Unforgiveness is a thief. It steals your energy, your health, your focus, and your future. It convinces you that by holding on to pain, you are somehow in control. But the opposite is true. The pain is in control of you. It dictates your moods, influences your decisions, and poisons your relationships. Letting go is not about letting the other person win. It is not about saying what they did was okay. It is about recognizing that the stone is too heavy. It is about realizing that your garden is too precious to be sacrificed for a weed. It is about choosing to take your energy back from the past so you can use it to build a beautiful present. It is the first, most difficult, and most crucial step toward reclaiming your own freedom. Part 2. Understanding forgiveness. What it is and what it isn't. In the quiet theater of our minds, the word forgiveness is often met with a chorus of protest. The script we've been handed by culture, by pride, by pain itself, tells us a story full of misconceptions. We see it as a sign of weakness, a betrayal of our own suffering, a ridiculous absolution for an unforgivable act. Our inner voice screams, "They don't deserve it!" And that is precisely where the confusion begins. We think forgiveness is a gift we give to the other person, but it has never been for them. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself. Let's begin by sweeping away the clutter and looking at what forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not condoning or excusing. It is not saying, "What you did was okay." It is not minimizing the pain, trivializing the betrayal, or pretending the wound doesn't exist. You can forgive someone entirely while still acknowledging, with crystal clarity, that their actions were wrong, harmful, and unacceptable. It's like looking at a shattered vase. Forgiveness is not pretending the vase was never broken. It is deciding that you will no longer cut your own hands on the sharp, broken pieces. You see the damage for what it is, but you choose not to bleed for it forever. Forgiveness is not forgetting. The phrase "forgive and forget" is perhaps one of the most damaging cliches in our emotional vocabulary. Forgetting a deep hurt, especially one born of trauma or betrayal, is often impossible. More than that, it can be unwise. Our memories serve a purpose. They teach us, they protect us, they inform our future choices. Forgiveness doesn't erase the memory. It changes the memory's relationship with you. It removes the venom from the memory's sting. The scar remains, a reminder of a wound that has been healed, not a wound that is still festering. You will remember what happened, but you will no longer be emotionally chained to it. The memory will become a part of your story, not the defining chapter of your entire life. Forgiveness is not necessarily reconciliation. This is a critical distinction. You can forgive someone completely and still choose never to see them or speak to them again. Forgiveness is an internal process, a shift that happens within your own heart and mind. Reconciliation is an interpersonal process, an act of rebuilding a relationship. Reconciliation requires two willing parties. It requires trust, remorse, and changed behavior from the person who caused the harm. But forgiveness requires only one person, you. If a relationship is toxic, abusive, or fundamentally unsafe, forgiving the person who hurt you is an act of profound self-care, while reconciling with them would be an act of self-harm. You can forgive from a distance. You can wish them peace from across a chasm you have no intention of crossing. You are releasing them from the prison of your mind, not inviting them back into your home. Forgiveness is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it is one of the greatest displays of strength a human being can undertake. It is easy to hold a grudge. It is instinctual to respond to pain with anger. It is the path of least resistance. But to look your pain directly in the eye, to feel its full weight, to acknowledge the depth of the injustice, and then to consciously, deliberately, choose to let go of the corrosive bitterness. That is an act of immense courage. It is taking control of your own emotional state rather than allowing it to be controlled by someone else's past actions. Weakness is letting someone who hurt you years ago continue to dictate how you feel today. Strength is saying, "You do not have that power over me anymore." So, if forgiveness is none of those things, what is it? Forgiveness is a conscious decision to release yourself from the burden of resentment. It is an active choice. It is not a passive feeling that washes over you one day when you wake up. It often begins as a disciplined, intellectual decision. I no longer want to feel this way. I no longer want to carry this stone. I choose to begin the process of letting go. The feelings may not follow immediately. The anger may still bubble up. The sadness may still visit. But the choice, once made, becomes your anchor. It is the North Star that guides you back when you get lost in the familiar forests of old anger. Forgiveness is reclaiming your power. As long as you hate someone, you are connected to them. You are bound by a twisted, energetic cord of negativity. Your thoughts circle back to them. Your emotions are triggered by them. They live rent-free in the most prime real estate in your universe, your mind. To forgive is to cut that cord. It is an act of emotional sovereignty. It is to say, your actions belong to you, and they will stay in the past. My present and my future belong to me, and I will fill them with peace. You take back the pen and become the author of your own story once again, instead of endlessly rereading the painful chapter someone else wrote. Forgiveness is a practice of empathy, not sympathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Forgiveness often involves trying to understand the other person's story, not to excuse their behavior, but to contextualize it. It is recognizing that hurt people often hurt people. Their actions likely came from their own pain, their own fear, their own brokenness. This doesn't make the pain they caused you any less real, but it can depersonalize it. It shifts the narrative from, "They did this to me," to, "This is what a person in their situation, with their level of consciousness and their own wounds, did." It allows you to see their flawed humanity, which can be the key that finally unlocks your own prison cell. You stop seeing them as a monster and start seeing them as a person who did a monstrous thing, which is a subtle but profound shift. Ultimately, forgiveness is an act of profound self-love. It is the ultimate recognition that your own peace of mind is more important than being right. It is the understanding that your health is more valuable than their punishment. It is the decision to clean your own inner garden, not because the person who threw the seeds of weeds deserves a beautiful view, but because you deserve to live in a beautiful place. It is the final, powerful acknowledgement that you are worthy of peace, and you are the only one who can give it to yourself. It's looking in the mirror and saying, "I love you enough to set you free from this." Part 3. The science and spirit of letting go. For centuries, humanity has wrestled with the concept of forgiveness through the lenses of philosophy, spirituality, and religion. It has been hailed by saints and sages as a cornerstone of enlightenment and a pathway to the divine. But in our modern world, where we seek evidence and data, it is remarkable to find that science is now catching up to this ancient wisdom. The microscope and the MRI are beginning to reveal the tangible, measurable truth of what mystics have been teaching for millennia. Letting go is not just good for the soul, It is profoundly good for the brain and the body. Let's first step into the laboratory. When you hold on to a grudge, your brain perceives it as a chronic threat. The amygdala, the brain's almond-shaped alarm system, stays on high alert. It continuously signals the hypothalamus to trigger the stress response, flooding your system with cortisol. Dr. Stephen Standiford, the chief of surgery at the Cancer Treatment Centers of America, has spoken about how he has seen a clear link between unforgiveness and disease. He posits that holding on to these negative emotions creates a state of chronic anxiety, which produces an excess of adrenaline and cortisol, decreasing the body's natural killer cells. These cells are our first line of defense against cancer. In a very real way, the bitterness is disarming your body's own protectors. Now, let's look at what happens when you practice forgiveness. Research from institutions like the Stanford Forgiveness Project, led by Dr. Fred Luskin, has shown remarkable changes in the brain. The practice of forgiveness, which often involves reframing the story and cultivating empathy, appears to strengthen activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain associated with problem-solving, emotional regulation, and wise decision-making. As the prefrontal cortex becomes more engaged, it can effectively soothe the hyper-reactive amygdala. You are, in essence, training your brain to choose a calm, reasoned response over a panicked, angry one. It's like upgrading your brain's internal operating system from one based on reactive survival to one based on conscious peace. Furthermore, studies using fMRI scans have shown that the act of empathizing with someone, even someone who has hurt you, activates the same neural circuits that light up when we experience pleasure. This is the neurological basis of the helper's high. When you truly work to understand the pain or brokenness that may have motivated the other person, your brain rewards you with a dose of feel-good neurochemicals like dopamine and oxytocin. It is a biological incentive system, pushing us toward connection and understanding, away from the isolation of anger. But long before we had the technology to peer inside the brain, this wisdom was the bedrock of spiritual traditions around the world. These traditions understood that unforgiveness was a fundamental obstacle to a meaningful life. They just used a different vocabulary. In Buddhist philosophy, holding on to anger is described as holding a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. The Buddha taught that clinging to desire, to aversion, to resentment is the root of all suffering, dukkha. Forgiveness, in this context, is a radical act of non-clinging. It is the release of aversion. It is not done for the other person's sake, but as a practical step to end one's own suffering. It is a core component of metta, or loving-kindness meditation, where one extends wishes of peace and freedom from suffering to all beings, including oneself, and most challenging of all, one's enemies. This practice is a gentle but powerful reprogramming of the heart, away from the habit of condemnation and toward the habit of compassion. In the Christian tradition, forgiveness is central. The Lord's Prayer contains the line, "Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us." This is not merely a request for divine pardon. It is the acknowledgement of a spiritual law. It suggests that our ability to receive grace is intrinsically linked to our ability to extend it. The grace is not conditional, but our hearts must be open to receive it, and a heart filled with bitterness has no room. The parable of the unforgiving servant in the Gospel of Matthew tells of a man forgiven an astronomical debt by his king, who then refuses to forgive a tiny debt owed to him by a fellow servant. The story's lesson is stark. To hoard resentment while expecting mercy is a profound spiritual contradiction. Forgiveness is seen as a reflection of the divine nature within us, an act that aligns us with a universal current of love and redemption. In the Jewish tradition, the concept of Mechila, forgiveness, is nuanced and deeply psychological. While forgiveness for sins against God is sought on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, it is taught that God cannot forgive a sin committed by one person against another until the offender has sincerely sought forgiveness from the person they have wronged. This places a powerful emphasis on human responsibility. But for the person who has been wronged, the tradition also encourages forgiveness as a way of releasing oneself from the evil inclination, Yetzer Hara, that thrives on anger and vengeance. It is understood that carrying a grudge gives the person who hurt you continued power over your spiritual and emotional well-being. Even in secular philosophy, the power of letting go is recognized. The Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, taught that we cannot control the actions of others, only our own responses. To be endlessly enraged by another's misdeed is to give them control over your inner tranquility, the only thing you truly possess. Forgiveness, from a Stoic perspective, is a supreme act of logic. It is recognizing that your emotional turmoil is a poor strategy for a good life. It is the choice to focus your energy on your own virtue and equanimity, rather than squandering it on another person's vice. What is so beautiful is how these two worlds, the scientific and the spiritual, are describing the very same mountain from different sides. The neuroscientist talks about down-regulating the amygdala. The Buddhist talks about cooling the fires of anger. The psychologist speaks of reframing a narrative to reduce trauma. The Christian speaks of grace and seeing the other as a child of God. The doctor notes the reduction in cortisol. The Stoic notes the attainment of inner peace. They are all pointing to the same fundamental truth. The state of unforgiveness is a state of profound dis-ease, a disharmony that echoes through our biology, our psychology, and our spirit. Letting go is the act of returning to a state of ease, of harmony. It is a holistic healing. When you forgive, you are not just performing a single action. You are calming your nervous system, rewiring your brain, boosting your immune system, and aligning yourself with the timeless wisdom that has guided humanity toward peace for millennia. You are treating the root cause of your suffering, not just the symptoms. You are choosing to work with the fundamental nature of your being, which is designed to heal, to connect, and to thrive. Not to be perpetually locked in a battle with the ghosts of yesterday. Part 4. The Path to Forgiveness, a Gentle Guide. Knowing that the stone is heavy is one thing. Knowing how to open your hand is another. The path to forgiveness is rarely a straight line. It is a spiral, a journey we may have to take several times for the same wound. It is a process that requires patience, gentleness, and a deep commitment to your own well-being. It cannot be rushed, and it cannot be forced. This is not a list of rules, but a series of gentle invitations, steps you can take at your own pace when you feel ready. Step 1. Acknowledge the pain fully. You cannot heal a wound by pretending it isn't there. Before you can let go of the pain, you must allow yourself to feel it. Give yourself permission to be angry, to be sad, to be hurt. Forgiveness does not begin with a leap into the light. It begins by sitting quietly in the dark and acknowledging where you are. Find a safe space and a quiet moment. Let the memories come, not to dwell on them, but to honor their reality. Speak them out loud, write them in a journal, or tell a trusted friend. Say, I was hurt. What happened was not fair. I am angry about it. I am sad about it. Give your pain a voice. This is not complaining. It is validating your own experience. We often try to rush past this stage, to be strong and get over it. But true strength lies in the courage to face the truth of your suffering. By giving your pain this attention, you rob it of its illicit power. It no longer needs to scream for your attention from the basement of your subconscious. You have brought it into the light, and in the light, things can begin to change. Step 2. Make the conscious choice to forgive. As we explored earlier, forgiveness begins with a decision. It is an act of will. Once you have acknowledged your pain, you can then make a choice about what to do with it. You can recognize that while the initial hurt was not your choice, your continued suffering is. This choice might be as simple as a quiet affirmation. You can say to yourself, I am ready to be free. I am choosing to let go of this resentment, not for them, but for me. I am willing to begin the process of forgiveness. You may need to make this choice every day, sometimes every hour. When the familiar wave of anger rises, you can gently meet it and say, I remember you, but I am choosing a different path now. This choice is your compass. It doesn't instantly transport you to your destination, but it keeps you pointed in the right direction. Step 3. Reframe the story by seeking understanding. This is often the most challenging, yet most transformative part of the journey. It involves shifting your perspective from that of a victim to that of an observer of a painful human event. It is the work of cultivating empathy. Ask yourself some difficult questions, not to find excuses for the person's behavior, but to understand it. What pain, fear, or ignorance might have been driving them? What is their story? Were they acting from a place of malice or from a place of their own deep brokenness? As we said before, hurt people hurt people. A person who is whole, happy, and at peace does not go around inflicting pain on others. Their actions were a reflection of their inner state, not a reflection of your worth. This process depersonalizes the injury. It moves from, this was a calculated attack on me, to, this was the result of a damaged person lashing out. Imagine the person who hurt you as a small child. What wounds did they endure? What love did they not receive? This is not about feeling sorry for them. It is about seeing their full humanity, flaws and all. This broader perspective can create a small space between you and the raw emotion of the event, and in that space, forgiveness can begin to grow. You are not changing the facts of what happened. You are changing the story you tell yourself about what it means. The old story might be, I was betrayed and I am forever broken. The new story could be, I experienced a painful betrayal, and it taught me about my own resilience and capacity for compassion. The first story is a life sentence. The second is a lesson. Step 4. Release the emotional debt. When someone hurts us, we often create a kind of emotional contract. We believe they owe us an apology, remorse, or some form of repayment for the pain they caused. We then wait, sometimes for a lifetime, for them to pay this debt. But in most cases, they never will. They may be unwilling, unable, or simply unaware of the debt you are holding over them. Forgiveness is the act of canceling this debt. You come to the profound realization that the only person suffering from this unpaid bill is you. You are the one checking the mail every day for a payment that will never arrive. To release the debt is to say, I no longer require anything from you to be whole. I no longer need your apology, your understanding, or your regret for me to heal. My healing is my responsibility. A powerful exercise here is to write a letter to the person who hurt you. Pour out all your anger, pain, and sadness onto the page. Hold nothing back. And then, at the end, write the words, I release you. I cancel the debt. I set myself free. You do not need to send this letter. In fact, it is usually better not to. The letter is for you. It is a ceremony of release. After writing it, you can burn it, tear it up, or bury it as a symbolic act of letting go. Step 5. Focus on the peace and freedom you gain. Instead of focusing on what the other person does or doesn't deserve, shift your focus to yourself. What are the benefits of letting this go? Remind yourself of the garden. By forgiving, you are pulling out the weeds. You are clearing the stream. You are allowing the sun to shine on your flowers again. Think about the energy you will reclaim. What could you do with all the mental and emotional resources you are currently spending on resentment? You could learn a new skill, deepen a healthy relationship, create art, or simply enjoy a quiet moment without the background noise of old anger. Whenever you find yourself slipping back into the old patterns of thought, gently redirect your mind to the feeling of peace you are choosing. It's like training a puppy. You don't scold it for wandering off. You just gently guide it back to where you want it to be. Ah, there's that anger again. Thank you for trying to protect me, but I'm choosing peace now. This gentle, non-judgmental redirection is key. You are not fighting with yourself. You are guiding yourself home. This path is not easy. It requires the heart of a warrior. But the battle is not against another person. The battle is against the poison in your own cup. And the victory is not their defeat, but your own liberation. Part 5. Stories of freedom. Journeys of forgiveness. Sometimes, the most powerful way to understand a concept is through the stories of those who have walked the path. These are not famous people, but ordinary souls who faced extraordinary pain and chose the difficult road of release. Their names are changed, but their journeys are real. The story of Clara and the broken trust. Clara had been best friends with Sarah for 20 years. They had been each other's maids of honor, godmothers to each other's children. Their families were intertwined like two old, strong trees. When Clara's small catering business began to struggle, Sarah, who was an accountant, offered to help her manage the books. Clara handed everything over with a sigh of profound relief and gratitude. A year later, Clara discovered the truth. Sarah had been systematically embezzling money, small amounts at first, then larger and larger sums. She had stolen tens of thousands of dollars, pushing Clara's business to the brink of bankruptcy, while lamenting with her over coffee about how tough the economy was. The betrayal was absolute. It was not just about the money. It was a dagger to the heart of a 2-decade friendship. For the first 2 years after the discovery, Clara was consumed by a righteous, burning rage. She pursued legal action, and every day was filled with conversations with lawyers, reviewing bank statements and reliving the deceit. She won the case, but she felt no victory. The money was gone, and Sarah showed no remorse, claiming she had been desperate. Clara's inner world was a storm. She couldn't trust new friends. She second-guessed her own judgment. She felt a constant, bitter acid in her stomach. The weight of her hatred was making her physically sick. Her turning point came one afternoon while watching her daughter play in the park. Her daughter laughed, a pure, uninhibited sound of joy, and Clara realized she couldn't remember the last time she had felt anything like that. She saw that in her quest for justice, she had sacrificed her own joy. That evening, she sat down and acknowledged the pain. She wept for the friendship she had lost, for the trust that had been shattered. Then, she began the slow work of reframing. She tried to imagine Sarah's desperation. It didn't excuse the theft, but it painted a picture of a human being in a state of deep fear and moral collapse. Clara started to see the act not as a personal attack on her, but as the tragic final act of a woman she no longer knew. She wrote the letter she would never send. Page after page was filled with her fury and her grief. And then, with a trembling hand, she wrote, "I release you from the debt, not because you deserve it, but because I can no longer afford the price of carrying it." She burned the letter, and as the ashes floated away, she felt a tiny, fragile shift inside her. It wasn't a miracle. The anger still visited, but now, when it came, she could greet it as an old acquaintance and gently show it the door. She started focusing on the lessons. She learned to be more discerning, to set better boundaries, and to appreciate the truly trustworthy people in her life. Slowly, the color returned to her world. Her business, now smaller, but managed by her own careful hand, began to thrive again. Clara never spoke to Sarah again. She had forgiven, but she had not reconciled. The freedom she found was not in getting her money back, but in getting her peace back. She had opened her hand and let the stone drop, and she could finally hear the sound of her own daughter's laughter again. The story of David and the absent father. David's father left when he was 6 years old. There was no fight, no dramatic exit. He just packed a bag one morning and never came back. His childhood was a long, quiet ache of absence. Every birthday, every school play, every baseball game was marked by a conspicuous empty seat. He grew into a man with a deep, unarticulated wound. He was successful in his career, but his relationships were difficult. He was distant, afraid of commitment, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the person he loved to simply vanish. He harbored a cold, hard knot of resentment for his father. He imagined him as a monster, a selfish coward who had thrown his own child away without a second thought. This narrative protected him. It made his pain feel valid and just. When David was in his late 30s, he received a letter. His father was dying and wanted to see him. David's first instinct was to burn the letter. But a deeper curiosity, a need for closure, gnawed at him. He went to the hospital, his heart encased in 30 years of armor. The man in the bed was a frail, withered stranger, and he told David his story. He had been a young man struggling with severe, undiagnosed bipolar disorder. He loved David's mother, and he loved his son. But he was terrified of the darkness inside him, the violent mood swings he couldn't control. He left because he believed he was a danger to them. He thought they would be better off without him. He had spent his life riddled with guilt, watching David from a distance, too ashamed to ever make contact. In that moment, David's story shattered. The monster he had constructed in his mind for 3 decades dissolved into a tragic, mentally ill man who had made a terrible decision out of a twisted sense of love. The anger that had been his constant companion vanished, replaced by a profound, heartbreaking sadness for the life his father had lived and for the childhood he himself had lost. David sat with his father for the next 2 weeks, until the end. They didn't talk much about the past. Instead, David told him about his life, his doom, his dreams. He was not condoning his father's choice. He was not excusing the pain it caused. He was simply meeting the real man, the broken man, and letting go of the phantom he had been fighting his whole life. When his father passed away, David felt not the triumph of outliving his enemy, but a quiet peace. The empty seat in his heart was not suddenly filled, but the sharp, angry edges around it had softened. He had not forgotten the pain of his childhood, but he had released the bitterness. Forgiving his father allowed David, for the first time, to start the process of truly being a father to himself. He finally felt safe enough to build a lasting, loving relationship, because he understood that love doesn't always leave. Sometimes, it just gets lost. These stories show us that forgiveness is not a simple, tidy event. It is a messy, human, and deeply personal journey. It is the story of choosing peace over pain, choosing freedom over bondage, and choosing to write a new ending for yourself, one that is not defined by the wounds of the past. Part 6. Embracing a forgiving heart. A lifelong practice. We have walked a long road together. We have looked at the crushing weight of the stone in our hand, demystified the true nature of forgiveness, and explored the science and soul of letting go. We have followed a gentle guide and heard stories of those who found freedom. But the journey does not end here. Forgiveness is not a one-time transaction that, once completed, is over forever. It is a practice. It is a muscle. It is a way of being in the world. To embrace a forgiving heart is to choose, again and again, to live in a state of grace rather than a state of grievance. Think of it like tending to your inner garden. You may have pulled out the large, thorny vine of a major grudge, but smaller weeds will always try to sprout. Life will continue to present us with small hurts, minor injustices, and daily frustrations. A colleague takes credit for your work. A driver cuts you off in traffic. A friend makes a thoughtless remark. We are faced with a constant stream of opportunities to either pick up a small pebble of resentment or to let it lie on the ground. Embracing a forgiving heart means becoming a quicker, more graceful forgiver of these smaller things. It is about reducing the time between the sting of the hurt and the peace of release. You begin to recognize the feeling of resentment as soon as it arises, that familiar tightening in the chest, the hot flush of anger, and you learn to meet it with a new response. Instead of feeding it, you breathe. You acknowledge the feeling. Ah, that stings. My pride is hurt. And then you make a conscious choice. This is not worth my peace. You let it go. Not because the other person deserves it, but because your inner tranquility is too precious to trade for such a small price. This becomes a form of emotional hygiene, like brushing your teeth. You do it every day to prevent the buildup of plaque. You practice small acts of forgiveness daily to prevent the buildup of bitterness. This practice makes you more resilient. When a larger hurt inevitably comes along, you are not starting from scratch. Your forgiveness muscle is already strong. Your heart is already open. The path is more familiar. This practice also changes how you see others. When you have a forgiving heart, you begin to look at the world through a lens of compassion. You understand that everyone is fighting a hard battle. Everyone carries their own invisible wounds. The person who was rude to you in the grocery store may have just lost their job. The friend who forgot to call you back may be struggling with depression. This doesn't excuse their behavior, but it softens your heart toward them. You lead with curiosity instead of condemnation. You give people the grace you hope to receive. And perhaps the most important part of this lifelong practice is learning to extend that same grace to yourself. We are often our own harshest critics, the keepers of our most stubborn grudges. We hold on to our own mistakes with a white-knuckled grip. We punish ourselves for things we said 10 years ago, for opportunities we missed, for times we did not live up to our own ideals. Self-forgiveness is the ultimate act of peacemaking. It is looking at your own imperfections, your own failures, your own flawed humanity, and meeting it all with love. It is treating yourself with the same compassion you would offer to a dear friend. It is acknowledging your mistake, learning the lesson it came to teach you, and then letting it go. It is the understanding that you are, and always have been, worthy of love and peace, regardless of your past actions. You cannot truly have a forgiving heart for others until you have one for yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So, how do we live this way? We do it one moment at a time. Do it by starting our day with the intention to be peaceful. We do it by catching ourselves when we are lost in a negative thought loop and gently guiding our minds back to the present. We do it by offering a silent wish of peace to the person who frustrates us. We do it by looking in the mirror at the end of the day and saying, "You did your best, and that is enough. I forgive you." The journey of forgiveness is the journey back to ourselves. It is the process of shedding the heavy armor we thought was protecting us, only to find that it was suffocating us. It is the rediscovery of the light, peaceful, and joyful being that has always existed beneath the layers of hurt and resentment. Let us return to where we began, to the stone in your outstretched hand. Feel its weight. Acknowledge its presence. It has been your companion for a long time. It has shaped your days and haunted your nights. Thank it for the lessons it taught you about your own strength, about the depths of your own heart. And now, gently, with intention, with grace, and with a profound love for the free person you are about to become, unclench your fingers. Let it fall. Listen! Do you hear that? The sound of the stone hitting the ground? That is the sound of your freedom. The silence that follows, that is the sound of your peace.